Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. You're on Understanding and Managing the Labor Shortage with UKG Dimensions. We're going to give all of our attendees a little bit more time to join us and try to start right at 12 or just a little bit after. So hang tight for a sec. Hi, everyone. Again, it looks like we still have a few people trying to join their audio. So I'm going to give just a few more seconds and then we'll get started. Thanks for coming. Okay, I think we have everyone on. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Again, this is Understanding and Managing the Labor Shortage with UKG Dimensions, and we are Mosaic Consulting Group. So thank you for coming today. Before we dive in, if you've been here before, you know the drill. We schedule these right around lunchtime. So if you have anything that's extra crunchy or any noise going on in the background, do not worry, you are on mute. We cannot hear you. I promise 100% that that's by design so that you can enjoy whatever you are eating today. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. We have Caitlin Scarston online. She's going to be managing that Q&A box and the chat box. Caitlin, if you don't mind going ahead and dropping in our first link in the chat box there at the bottom. So you'll see a link with our blog for today. Later today, we'll actually be posting the recording of the webinar and the slides that we use today so that you guys can use them and send them to anyone on your team who would find this useful. I do want to point out at the bottom, you have a couple buttons. One of them is the Q&A box where you can submit any questions that you have. We'll find a good stopping point to ask your question out loud for John, or if Caitlin can answer it right there, she'll go ahead and do that. There's also a closed captioning button down there that you can turn on if you need it. It is automatically generated closed captioning. So it might catch some words that might look a little weird, but they will be there if you need them. So before we dive in, let me introduce myself. My name is Ceci Spear. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Mosaic. And I want to tell you a little bit about what's happened since our last webinar. Mosaic has had a really big quarter. It's been really exciting. We are certified as a best place to work. We also made it on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing privately held companies for the 4th year in a row, which was a really exciting milestone. And last and definitely not least, the most exciting thing that happened in the last few months is that we expanded our offering. So you know, Mosaic in the past has been known for being a legacy UltiPro expert. We focus 100% on UKG products. And now we have a WFM division. So that means that we now offer implementation, post-implementation support, and optimization services for UKG Dimensions and the legacy Kronos products. So that's really exciting. And I'm so happy to introduce John West today. He's the vice president of this new division. So John has extensive background in workforce management. His hands-on experience with WFM tools comes from his work in the retail industry. He transitioned into the consulting world in 2008, and then in 2015, he actually founded his own consulting firm, Westward. Earlier this year, like I mentioned, Mosaic actually acquired Westward, and John and his team joined us as our new WFM division. We're so excited to have John here today. We'll be talking and going over what the labor shortage is and how it might be affecting your business specifically, how you can manage and understand its impact using dimensions, how to plan and forecast, and then we'll talk a little bit about some suggestions on how to retain and recruit top talent. We'll take a little bit of time near the end to go into UKG Dimensions advanced scheduling, and John will show us exactly what that tool looks like and the type of information and data that you can get out of it to help you make better decisions. So without further ado, John, I think in the first section, we're going to be talking about the labor shortage. I'd love to hear what you think about it, how we got here kind of in a workforce data sort of lens. What got us here?
All right, thank you so much for the introduction. Thank everybody for joining. Excited to be here and talk through this. Let's start by just setting the stage of what's happened. Kind of this pandemic whiplash effect has been going on. We had this immediate contraction of demand when COVID first happened, and then we saw it snap really quickly. So demand came down, layoffs started happening, people left the workforce, but then demand came back really strong, but the workers did not return. And so open positions really came back much faster than people were willing to return to work. We know that certain things like unemployment supplementation seems to be part of the factor of people not returning to work. But even in certain states where they've ended that supplementation, we're still seeing a lack of return to like the full force of the workforce. And then churn, is kind of high right now, which is good for trying to fill in a workforce. It can be bad if you're losing folks. Because there was a sense of normalcy that started coming into play. And so people started looking for other jobs, willing to take a little more risk in job changes. But now with the Delta and Mu variants and all this uncertainty kind of coming back into play, we might start to see a reduction of churn. People might start locking down in their jobs and really, stopping the hunt. So we might see some churn reduce there. It's a really interesting time. The report came out today or late yesterday about July job openings, highest in the history of the United States at 10.9 million. That beat the highest in history from the previous month in June of 10.2 million. Yet there's 8.4 million Americans remaining out of the workforce. So we've got this interesting set of dynamics going on. So, what's really happening here? So what's changing in this environment? There's competition for talent at all levels. Now, you usually see the highest competition for high skilled labor, but we're actually seeing skilled and unskilled labor at the same level of competition. This has been something we haven't really seen in decades, where there's really an unskilled labor competition with, really what's going on is talent wars. Everyone's on the hunt to fill their positions, and at all levels. And there's different expectations too from the employees now. So there's a different set of standards of what people are looking for as well, which is adding another layer of dynamics. Folks that haven't really adjusted are having a tougher time competing in this, talent war that's going on. And these expectations, they're pretty high, but it's not something we can just blame on millennials or a Gen Z thing. It's not really that easy. There's this expectation to remove the frustration around employment that was found in older systems. And we find that it's really so much of it has to do with communication. We live on our phone, we order our food on our phone, we handle, paying our bills on our phone. Why can't I handle communicating with my employer, via an app or via my phone? Like that becomes a standard expectation, right? If I need a day off, I should be able to make that request rather quickly, right through my phone. And God forbid I should have to show up to my place of employment and go, stare my boss in the eyes and ask him for a day off, or find a sticky note and go stick it on a board and hope somebody picks up my shift. Like those are, now went from nice to haves, but those are clearly an expectation now. And so that's, a lot going on in this market right now that's creating this challenge. Demand high, labor supply is low. And the first step in solving a problem is admitting you have one, right? So let's talk about recognizing that gap in your organization. You have to think about your organization and what's going to hit you the hardest, right? If you're a seasonal business, it's a double whammy, right? You're already understaffed, and now you're heading into season where you're expected to make the bulk of your profits for the year. It's tough, and we're seeing it across all industries, whether you're seasonal or not. But seasonality creates a deeper effect, for those that are really relying on seasonal revenues. Retail coming into season, manufacturers are already behind the ball in meeting demand, and distribution shortages are creating these wild logistics issues. And so, think about you, like, what's your seasonal impact? Where are you seeing this effect across your organization?
I think it's a really good point to make, John. And I was surprised. So Caitlin and I were working on um, trying to get swag to a big client that we have who's coming on board, and we're really excited about them coming on board. And I use the marketing industry term swag, I mean branded corporate branding materials. So usually doing something like that, takes us a couple weeks from the idea of having it to ordering it to having it in-house. Maybe 3 weeks is a long time. And the labor shortage really affected that timeline for us. So we're a services industry, and it's something that we wanted to do, and we thought we had time to do it. And then when we reached out to our vendors, they actually had to reach out to 4 or 5 of their own vendors to try to find product and try to find, a team that could deliver it in the timeline that we had. Most teams were looking at 6 months for, 50 um, 50 pieces of product with the logo on it, which was just really surprising. So it really is in different ways affecting every industry.
Yeah, it's not just slow service at a restaurant, or not finding somebody to help you in a store, but just getting your swag, is a problem now. And there's a cost to that. When you think about it, even though COVID's still around, the COVID excuse of, missing targets is losing its teeth. And so you really have to think about, like, what is this going to look like coming into these upcoming quarters? What does your forecast for the upcoming quarter really look like? And what's it based off of? All right. So are you basing your forecast off of optimal staffing that you're not at and you don't think you're going to be at? And what years are you using to create that forecast? What are you using for comparative analysis? All right. And what was staffing like those years? All right. So now you have to adjust. And this is where HR and finance and those operation leaders, they have to get real with each other. All right. And what's the first step in getting real? For me, it's getting real analytical through what I like to call identification and quantification. So, this feels kind of daunting. There's 10.9 million openings, and we have Delta variants, it's labor shortage. Will there be enough pumpkin spice for fall this year? These are tough questions. You got to take a deep breath. I'll tell you something that's both simultaneously kind of scary, but should provide a little bit of relief. You're not going to solve it, right? Not all of it, not all at once. The great Shel Silverstein told us about Melinda May and gave us the answer to approaching any new or daunting task. How do you eat a whale? You start at the tail and go one bite at a time. So starting at the tail means breaking your organization down into pieces and starting to segment it out. There's logical groupings that you probably already use, geography, regions, districts, sites, right? Those make sense. Staffing particularly suffering in a specific part of the country. Do you know where it's worse? If so, you know where to concentrate your efforts. Or maybe it's a particular department or a shift, right? And so when you start breaking into these smaller pieces, things start to be a little more palatable. It may not be endemic across your whole organization, but you can start to see where it's really the biggest issue. And so then there's revenue tiers. Often in retail and other types of organizations, you break your locations down by revenue tiers. So you may have high volume locations, mid volume locations, and low volume locations. And sometimes the impact of labor shortages affects those tiers differently. So if you think about it, think about like a retail store that's high volume. They're in a great location. They get a ton of foot traffic, right? And they're going to continue to get that foot traffic kind of regardless of what your staffing is there. So you may not see a really big hit on revenue because they're lower staffed. And then you have your low volume locations, which are traditionally minimally staffed. So you might have to trim hours here or there or operating hours, but you're not going to see this, dramatic impact, as much there in total volume. But it's those mid-tier locations where service was their differentiator, right? They have to compete for their dollars and get people to come into the location. If they're understaffed, they're missing that service goal. Customers notice, and that's when you'll start seeing a loss, and bigger impact in that mid-tier group, right? So it may not be the same impact across all types of revenue tiers.
So let's dig into that just a little bit more, John. If I have my list of locations or departments, or like if I segment it naturally and then it doesn't really feel like there's a thread to follow. Like if I don't really see an obvious pattern, is there any other way that you can think that I can segment, or anything else that I can look for to segment my business?
Yeah, that's a great point. Sometimes those logical groupings don't, show you the picture or the relationship, right, of how labor is affecting, things that maybe, you see some problems here and over here, and you're not sure what that common thread is. You start looking at the symptoms of this, and so you could see a few different things. For example, those high volume locations, right? Maybe they are doing okay from a revenue standpoint, but without appropriate staffing, product is starting to walk off the shelves, right? And right out the door without being paid for. Or with less supervision and folks around, employees start, stealing product as well. You start seeing shrink becomes a really big problem. Then you have manufacturing. They have a similar issue with waste and loss of productivity. So this may be really interesting because it may not be as straightforward as you would think. So third shift, let's say the overnight shift, is generally hard to staff anyways. So it's especially understaffed right now. So you're going to be missing productivity in that third shift. But for some reason, first shift is suffering as well. You've got higher waste there, right? Product damage and low productivity. You think about how that starts occurring. Third shift is understaffed, so they're leaving a bunch of cleanup and a bunch of unfinished product. So first shift comes in, they have to make up for all that. And so then you start seeing fatigue creating a factor, right? And so first shift is suffering more than you would expect them to because they're not as understaffed as third shift. Well, symptom points you back to that third shift. Then there's more obvious ones like overtime. That's a pretty painful symptom. You can really start tearing out by overtime usage. Percentage of overtime is a great way to look at that. It's easy to quantify the cost of overtime. Turnover, employees are getting burnt out and they're overburdened, and the cost of turnover is just staggering, I'm sure, as and then so you take those, these pieces, they give you a deeper breakdown, and you can see what the biggest impact to the bottom line is, right? It might be shrink, you may be missing revenue goals. This gives you an idea of how to prioritize that attack. And that goes to the second part of this. We identified these issues. Now we need to start quantifying them. So quantify the impact to the bottom line. That tells you where to prioritize, right? So where do we go attack this? And it can also help with budgeting incentives that you may want to put in place to address this as well. So if you know that your shrink cost is increasing and that's costing you an extra $100,000 a quarter, you can allocate some funds if you think you can cut that number down. Hey, let's take some of the win and use that to incentivize solving this problem. So getting into that quantification, some of it comes down to creating loose relationships between these numbers. So you can come up with some easy ways to identify what the impact is and how you can affect it. So if you're seeing a location off of revenue plan by $100,000 a month and they're short staffed by 5 people, create that simple relationship. It's $20,000 a head, right? We know it's not a direct causation, but at least you can start putting these numbers to and say, okay, if we can reduce this down by a couple head counts, we might be able to get ourselves $40,000 back towards our plan. Then shrink or waste, right? That's up 5%. You're down 5 staff. Create that loose relationship, 1%, per head count, and use that to start looking at how you can attack the problem. Then you can break that down even further. Let's say you've identified a region that is below plan by 10% this year, right? Compared to 5% for the other regions. Right, so this one has a special issue, and then you look into that region a little further, and you see that there's a district within that region that also has an increase of shrink by 5%. Right, and that's where you're like, okay, this is my problem. This is where I want to dive in and figure out what's happening here from a labor perspective, and that's what we'll use for our example today. We're going to use like a retail store example. We're going to dive into a specific district and see what we can figure out using UKG dimensions. So let me pull up my dimension sandbox here. And here I'm logged in as Lisa Peterson. She's our regional HR director, right? And she's going to take a look at what's going on. We see our dashboard here. All kinds of great stuff. She really cares about overtime. You can see there's a lot of overtime analysis going on here. She knows that that's a symptom she needs to address. And so the first thing that she wants to do is dive into forecast. So this is a forecast planner for retail built into Dimensions. It's a great tool for figuring out what's going to happen in the coming week. So we're going to look at next week as an example here, and we can see the sales forecast for our district. This is using historical data to generate this forecast, and we'll dive into a specific location as well. I noticed on that preliminary dashboard that store 74 actually had a lot of overtime and a lot of problems going on there, so I'm gonna pick on them a little bit here. So I'm looking at their sales forecast for next week, and it looks pretty reasonable. Sunday through Wednesday is pretty good. You can see Thursday, Friday, Saturday, that's when we get busy, right? We start getting busy. And we talked about, what is our forecast based off of, right? Is this a realistic, forecast as well, right? So I know that there's been changes in the business. We haven't been staffed up as well. We've been missing our plan, by 10, 15%. We need to adjust this. So working with my operations team, finance team, we figure out there's some adjustments that need to be made here. So for example, I think Friday is a little optimistic. I can change that down, right? So I'm going to change that to $4,500. Saturday, that's way above what I think we can actually clear out. So I need to create a realistic expectation, a realistic, volume of business that I think we can hit. That's going to allow me to understand what my staffing needs really are, right? So this one I'm going to bump down to $5,500. And what you'll see here, there's a relationship that is built into the system here between the sales, the number of items sold, and the transactions that are done here. And when I calculate the totals, it's going to change these numbers here to match this, what I adjusted in sales, right? So it has that relationship in there. It's going to break it down. That's important because that determines how much labor we actually need, right? So save my forecast. I've created a forecast that I think we can actually hit next week. Now I can dive into labor. how much labor is it going to take to do this, right? And so here I can, run the labor, and it's going to generate this labor forecast, how many hours per day to do that business, right? Now, normally I would rerun this labor, adjust it off that new forecast. Not going to do that right this second because I have my forecast already kind of set for labor, but I'll show you some other interesting ways of looking into this. I can pick a job, like our checkout job, and dive into it even deeper. You can get really analytical here and look at the labor, the head count, right, for this associate job every day, like every 15-minute period. Right? You can get real deeply analytical in there and see what's going on, where that demand is. But this really just to highlight, this is how the system is generating that demand. So our forecast, how much business we're going to do, how many people do we need to do that much business, right? That's our labor forecast here. So now we can look at a schedule. We're going to dive into the schedule for store 74 as well. So I'm going to go ahead and select that location. And then I'm going to pull up next week's schedule. Okay, we see this beautiful schedule here. We've got everybody filled in. I ran the generate schedule option, which allowed me to generate open shifts and then assign those open shifts. There's an engine in the application. If you're unfamiliar with the Dimensions, optimized scheduling product, it takes into account when people are available, what jobs they can do, how many hours a week should they be scheduled, and then it applies that to that workload. And here you can see the result of that. It looks pretty good at first glance, but then we can take a look down here at this really nifty graph that shows us our coverage. So that red line is the labor demand that we generated. And then the purple blue line is how many people are actually scheduled to meet that demand. And we're not doing too bad. Sunday through Wednesday looks pretty good, but then you see Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we've got some issues here. We can actually hover over this and see that there's, how many people are planned to be there. Here it's 6 people planned, and there's only 3 people scheduled. So that's going to be tough to handle that. We can see here 5 people planned, 3 people scheduled. So here's an illustration of our labor shortage in this location, right? You can just see it right here. And this is, important to have this line of sight. This is what managers can see in the application. They'll know where they're understaffed. Up here, you can see the open shifts that were left to be assigned. So we've got 3 shifts on Friday that need to be assigned. They're all closing shifts. Thursday, we've got a couple. Saturday, we've got 4 shifts that need to be assigned. We don't have anybody to really assign them to, though. It's going to be a tough order to fill, right? So we need to hire some folks up. One thing also, if we look here, we've got Eliana Rivera. She's been an awesome employee for us. She's been sticking it out with us through the pandemic. She helps us cover our closing shifts on Friday and Saturday. She's quite the expert. She's gonna have a tough night Friday and Saturday night. And, hopefully we're going to hire in, right? We'll find some people to fill in these shifts here, but they're going to be new people. She's going to have to train them up and support them on the floor. We should find some way to recognize that and support her. There's some different ways of doing that. One simple way, that we can do is we can put a premium pay code on there for her. So we want to reward her, make sure she knows that she's going to be, rewarded for supporting that shift. She's a trainer, so we're going to give her a trainer shift premium that day and apply it to that date for her. So now she's got an extra premium there. That could be, $1 an hour. It could be a whole shift premium. There's a ton of different ways to do that. It's just a simple way that you can, go in and support them and, show them, that you're rewarding them dealing with all those new faces and a tough schedule, right? So this is, very detailed at one location level. But we're dealing with an entire district too. So how can we look at this at a higher level and really turn this into something that we can prescribe an action to for this whole district? Because this whole district's suffering. So we have a data view here. Data views are kind of these, living reports, right? So you can create data views and gather all kinds of different information live from the application and see what's going on. Here I have an open shifts by location data view. And so what this pulls up is all of the open shifts for next week in this whole district, right? And I have it filtered down to just the associate job, right? That has the biggest impact on our stores. And so here I can see all of the open shifts for this district. We can see, wow, we've got quite a few open shifts for next week. Looking at it, just kind of looking at it this way, I can see they're all closing shifts, it looks like. Some mids in there, but mostly closing shifts, right? So everything kind of crossing that closing barrier is what we're seeing here. And so this gives me a quick way of kind of coming up with a summary of that information. Now you can start sharing that information. So let's say I want to export it because I'm an Excel nerd, so I'm really into that. I want to pull up my Excel sheet and share that. So I exported that, do a little Excel magic in there, and you can see it in a little different way. So I exported that information, and then I took this column, I just changed the date format. So it was like this, just, month, day. But I really wanted to look at it by the day of the week and come up with a prescription of what the issue is here. So I can start figuring out, like, okay, which days of the week are we suffering across this whole district? Now I can see here Sunday has 1 open shift, Monday has 2, 3 open shifts, Tuesday has 3, Wednesday 3, Thursday's a problem. We've got 11 open shifts there. Friday has 12 open shifts, and Saturday, all right, we've got 12 open shifts here. So now they're all closing shifts. So now I have this piece of information I can start sharing. I take this, send this over, say, to my HR analyst that handles recruiting and say, hey, we need to do something about this. This is my prescription to all of our symptoms, right? To the sickness that we have going on in this district. We need Thursday, Friday, and Saturday closers across the whole district. Maybe let's have a hiring blitz, right? Let's do a job fair, but let's make sure we're specific about what the need is, right? It is closers. I need people from 5 p.m. till 10:30 to show up for this. So that way, a bunch of people show up, they start going through the interviews, they actually fit what I need as a store manager. That's an amazing thing when I get to interview people that are actually fit the availability of what I need, and I don't have to sort through that piece. This becomes really helpful. It's truly a prescription to the problem that I have as a store manager.
That's awesome. And it makes a ton of sense to be as specific as you can. Like you said, it almost optimizes the recruiting process before it starts. If you say, we need people to close on Friday, and it also opens up, if someone's like casually looking for a job, it could be like a second job where it's just Friday, Saturday, Sunday after 5 p.m., like it opens up the pool too. So it's a really good point. I think it makes a lot of sense that we looked at it as the symptom being shrink, look at the data, really figure out exactly what's missing, and then having that very specific solution. So thank you for that. That was awesome. Okay, so I think our next step is looking forward and ways to solve it.
Right. We talked about the job listings, right? Like making sure they have that time, especially when you're looking for part-time workers, being specific in the availability you're looking for, really helpful. Somebody's looking for a side gig and, they may, go past your listing normally, but they see, oh, it's Thursday, Friday nights. I can do that. Like, this is, much more attractive to me. So making sure you've updated those listings, like, have you updated them like this year, this decade in some cases? I know it's easy to just copy and paste and reuse the same ones. I know I've been guilty of that in the past, but it's time to really look at those because, what you're looking for may have changed. The job that you're really looking for may have changed. In food service industry, we've seen a shift where there's different types of jobs needed. You might just have a runner now that's just handling online orders and running them out to stores or expediting them to the Grubhub guy, right? That's a whole different skill set than your typical cook or server, right? You don't need that same job description. And that might be more of the lines of what somebody wants to do. I don't want to deal with customers and have to take their order and do that, but I will run orders back and forth. I can definitely do that, right? Or what about other factors? Like, did your job change to where it could be a work from home job? Like, it'd be a great time to update that, let people know that that's an option because people are really looking for that. And then incentivizing candidates to check you out, right? We all heard about McDonald's. They offered like $50 to show up for an interview. I can't imagine how interesting that got. But you ever think about the incentives that you offer already, right? And are you highlighting those? What do you offer that people actually like? Have you asked your people? Have you surveyed them?
Yeah, and it's a really good point that you made. Even for us, so at Mosaic, most of our team is remote, and now we're actually highlighting. So, and it wasn't really something that we felt we had to say in job descriptions before, but now we do kind of highlight that because that's something people are looking for now. And going back, like at the beginning of a pandemic, we kind of took a step back and paused and looked at our great people and culture team, which is what we call our HR team. They took a look at the benefits that we were offering, kind of the extra benefits. And they sent out a survey using the tool UKG Pro Employee Voice. And it was a simple survey that listed all of those extra incentives or benefits that we got. And we were asked to kind of rate them. So just move them on the list to say which one we liked the best. And the one that ended up at the bottom was a book club a benefit that we had. And it was kind of an expensive benefit because people got the benefit of a cash sort of prize if they read certain books. There was no limit on book, but we also paid per user. So now the HR team, by simply asking us what we like the best, now they had the data to back up, hey, this is money that we're spending that might not necessarily be the best use of our money. And now that we're back, kind of everything has kind of normalized with the team, and we're back at a place where everyone's comfortable offering all of our incentives again. We asked again, right? The HR team asked, well, what do you want? Do you want the book club membership back? And our team came back with, well, it's getting really hard to work out and to be active. So we have a better benefit now that is an activity application. So it's called Wellable, and the whole team uses it, and it's about wellness as a whole. So now we know, just by asking the question, hey, what do you want? We're able to offer something that we know our team really enjoys.
Yeah. My deep reading consists of Where's Waldo usually, right? So definitely having a opportunity to use a wellness app was definitely more of along the lines of what I would be looking for, and really tailoring it towards who you are. Right, it works really well. When I was working in retail, I was working at GameStop in stores way back when. Awesome benefit where I could borrow the games. That was really cool. Like, and it worked, in two parts. Like, you're educating your employees as to what they're selling, and it fit the culture that they were trying to support as well. There's other ones I saw. I saw actually just this past weekend on the billboard at Taco Bell. It was work today, get paid today. Right? That's a whole other set of benefits, like that instant pay on demand. Right? If you look at like the type of employees you want and what you want to bring in, you're looking for somebody that could be a great benefit for them, right, as well. And it's really interesting, all the different ways that people are putting those together now. And so it really ties into figuring out, who you are, what your people want, right, listening to them. And then when you start figuring that out, so you're coming up with other incentives, maybe you have a gift card incentive or different bonus plans for managers for hitting hiring goals. You need to track the execution of that, right? So if you're going to start incentivizing hiring initiatives, and really like figure out how do you track it down, right? So if you've got 50 gift cards that were sent out, 50 people get hired, right? That avoids issues of fairness and other things, people gaming the system, and really getting out what you're investing into this program. I remember working with an organization that had these very aggressive seasonal hiring goals. You may have a small location, you got to hire 8 people going into the season before the holidays. And if you did hit that, there was incentives tied to that for the manager for making sure you hit that. What we found was, a lot of people hit those goals. They hired 8 people. Those 8 people never worked an hour, right? Never showed up for a shift. They got them in the system, fill out the paperwork, put them in, never put them on the schedule. Figured out a great way to game that system. It really screwed up the plan, that was in place too. So it's important to really have a tracking mechanism for any incentives that you're putting in place. And then, recognizing key players. Right? Remember Eliana, right? She was supporting that shift. We need to support her, right? So coming up with ways, you're not just incentivizing new employees, because that creates resentment, right? That doesn't reward loyalty. The people that helped you get here are also the people that are going to help, these new employees, get you through the season or through your staffing challenges. So you take time to figure out meaningful ways of rewarding that loyalty and the supporting cast that you have, and not just the new faces.
Yeah, and again, I think Caitlin just dropped in the chat box a link to our previous blog and webinar. So we did a webinar on UKG Pro Employee Voice, which is that survey tool that's within UKG Pro, and it has helped us. We are a case study of it, Mosaic ourselves. I mean, I think if Mosaic would have offered me skydiving classes, that is a benefit I know I would never ever use. I'm a big scaredy cat, but the using employee voice really lets Mosaic have a finger on the pulse of the team and know exactly, ask the question and be able to offer things that are very relevant to the team as we are, and also check on employee engagement and employee satisfaction. So make sure to if you're interested in learning more about that, make sure to check out that blog. I am going to open the floor up for questions here in a sec, but after our questions, we do have one more story, so stick around. So yeah, Caitlin, did any questions come through, or we'll pause here if anyone has any questions?
We don't have any questions currently in the chat box, but if anyone would like to write in some questions, we'll be sure to answer those right now.
And you will be getting an email from me after the session today with the link to the blog. In the blog, after the recording kind of processes, we'll upload the recording. I'll make sure to put these slides in there as well. So you'll get that email. That email really comes from me, so you can always just reply if questions come up later, and I'll make sure I'll get your questions to the right person that can answer those. So if you don't have them now, but they come up later, don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, awesome. I think we'll move on to our last slide, John, if you don't mind.
I had this amazing opportunity on vacation a few weeks back. I met a server at a restaurant, a young lady named Meg. She works at 4 different restaurants every week, right? And she's an amazing server, an aspiring entrepreneur. She wants to open her own restaurant. And she was willing to talk to me about the challenges she was facing, because every restaurant she worked at was understaffed, and she was one of the more experienced people there, so she was having to pick up the slack. And anytime somebody new came on, she was always paired up with them, and she was losing tips while helping other people get up to speed. And it was quite a challenge. And I was asking her, I'm like, well, what would make you happier in what you're doing? Like, what would make you more loyal to one restaurant than another, or show you that people care? And she's, I was expecting to hear, some kind of, monetary bonus or something that was going to be a little bit, tough to swallow, but it was actually really simple. She said a shift meal, right? Give her a meal each shift she put in, and that would mean the world to her. And she had one of the 4 restaurants she's working at did that regularly. Now, I asked her, I was like, well, why is that important? She said, well, hey, it's great to get fed, it's a really nice benefit. Like, but also, like, now I'm learning about what I'm serving. I have, product domain knowledge on what's going on here. I know what I like. I know what I don't like here. I can have these educated, conversations with my clients, and that's important to me. I want to be better at my job. I want to have more information, and it'll help me get better tips. It'll, help me support the organization better. I asked her then, I said, well, so has anybody asked you that? She said, no. No, they haven't. So nobody's asked me what I want. And if they did, I would tell them, like, a shift meal would be awesome. And it's a pretty easy way to do that. And it comes down to listening, right? Just, definitely ask your employees what's going on. They're going to tell you the keys to unlocking the kingdom of attracting and retaining more talent, right? They know what they want. They know what works. Generally, they'll tie it into, what your organization is as well. Right. So you don't have to come up with these wild, crazy new ideas, skydiving, all that kind of stuff. Like, really, your employees will tell you what's going to attract more people and retain them.
Exactly. And I'm sorry, I tried to test the link to make sure it was working. I think Caitlin is answering Melissa's question to make sure that link is working for everyone. So thank you so much, John. I really appreciate it. This was super informational. I think we can all take home, just think about your employees as people, and look at your data to make sure that you're building prescriptions that work for you, right, and have the biggest impact. So thank you, everyone. We'll be sending this email. Keep an eye out on your inboxes for the recording and these slides and all those special links. And thanks so much for your time, guys.